Think of the distinct shapes and colors defining modern art: Cézanne's structural landscapes, Gauguin's tropical symbolism, and Seurat's scientific precision with dots of color. History widely treats these three men as the primary architects of the modern era. Their names are the ones carved into the marble of our major institutions. Yet, despite their radically different aesthetics, these three icons converged on the same mentor when they were finding their way. Camille Pissarro was the singular person that they all turned to for guidance. This matrix charts the 8 Impressionist exhibitions held between 1874 and 1886. The group was volatile. Monet skipped some, Renoir bowed out, and Degas argued constantly. But Pissarro's line cut straight through all 8. He was the connective tissue keeping them functioning. Despite holding the entire movement together, his name barely registers in the public consciousness today compared to the artists who passed through his studio. This raises a question about the nature of legacy. How does the man who built the foundation of modern art slip into the shadows of the movement he kept alive? The answer starts with his origins. Born in 1830 on the island of St. Thomas in the Danish West Indies, Pissarro grew up completely isolated from the Parisian elite. When he finally arrived in Paris in his 20s, the son of a Jewish merchant, he was an outsider on multiple axes: colonial, Jewish, and largely self-taught. He wasn't trained in the usual academic way, which meant he arrived with no academic reputation to defend and no set rules to protect. Because he had no institution to defend, he wore his ideas lightly. This allowed him to mediate effectively when his contemporaries were feuding and abandoning the group over stylistic disputes. Lacking a traditional pedigree allowed him to maintain the relationships that kept the movement from fracturing entirely. He was free to prioritize the group's survival over his own ego. We see this focus clearly in how he treated others. Take Paul Cézanne. When he arrived in Paris, he was arrogant, difficult, and technically unformed. Almost nobody else in the art world took him seriously. Pissarro took him to Pontoise and spent years working with him on the rigorous discipline of painting directly from nature. Cézanne later described him as being like a father. Gauguin followed a similar path, working alongside Pissarro to build his foundation before leading to reinvent painting in the tropics. In 1885, Pissarro applied that same openness to his own work when he encountered the rigid scientific rules of pointillism. At 55 years old, Pissarro became a student again, adopting Georges Seurat's demanding method of applying single uniform dots of paint. He spent several years applying it seriously, even showing the results in the final Impressionist exhibition. Then he stopped. He found the technique too rigid. It stifled his spontaneous response to the scene in front of him. By testing and then rejecting the era's new dominant style, Pissarro proved his priorities. He cared about pursuing artistic truth, not protecting a personal brand. In his later years, Pissarro faced a devastating physical barrier. He developed a chronic eye infection that made it impossible for him to work outdoors. For an Impressionist, this was a disaster. Painting en plein air, out in the open air, was the fundamental practice of the movement he helped build. Stripped of his primary working environment, he adapted. Pissarro began renting hotel rooms overlooking the boulevards of major cities, setting up his canvas to paint the world from behind protective glass. Through these windows, he captured the streets below, the sprawling rooftops, and figures moving through the Paris rain. The limitation produced some of the finest canvases of his career. He soon expanded his scope to the waterfronts of Rouen and Dieppe. Even trapped indoors, his drive to capture diverse environments never slowed down. That intense, adaptive output continued right up until the week he died in Paris in 1903, at 73 years old. This highlights the paradox of his legacy: compromise, lifting others up, and refusing to lock yourself into a fixed brand are the exact traits required to anchor a movement, but they are the opposite of the traits that build individual fame. Today, we admire the towering skyline of modern art, built by figures like Cézanne, Gauguin, and Seurat. But that skyline simply could not exist without Pissarro serving as its foundation.